Hello, everybody. Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and we have Dr. Nicolo Bernardi as well. Say hi.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Megan, for having me here today.
Yeah, so exciting. So for those of you who are not familiar, Nicolo is the mindset coach in our work at MTC, and he serves our families consistently in both of in all of our offers. And what we're going to talk today about is one of Nicolo's specialties, which is the experience of wanting to be the perfect parent, right? So if you are a parent of a sensitive child who is stuck in the meltdown cycle and are wondering, am I cut out for this? Am I the right person to support my kid? Maybe my kid needs a different person to help them manage those big emotions. This is incredibly important for you to stay tuned in, because what we're going to be covering today is all about how to break out of that cycle of perfectionism yourself, so you can lead your child into the same pattern. Here at MTC, what we do, we help parents eliminate the daily meltdown cycle or daily shutdown cycle for sensitive kids and teens around the world. We've been doing this for years now, and we help parents do that in as little as 8 weeks, depending on the kid's age and the work that we do. And it's incredibly important to pay attention to what we're covering here, right? The meltdown cycle, when I say daily meltdowns, these are meltdowns your child is hitting, kicking, screaming, running away. A teenager is just shutting down, saying nothing's working. I can't do it. I might as well not even try. And that can be true for young kids as well. They can be frozen and shut down as well. But most of the behaviors that we see in our work, those meltdowns are outward rather than inward for younger children. And this is exhausting for you as a parent, right? We can see many people struggling with this challenge. We're going to focus on that because as your child is struggling, you probably have tried all kinds of things to turn this around. And one thing that we know for sure is that this can lead to a lot of ineffective thoughts and beliefs that hold you back. And so Nicolo is here to talk to us about some of those beliefs that are born in perfectionism.
Yeah, with pleasure, Megan, and I'll speak about it from two angles. One, that of working with hundreds of parents, with Megan Thompson Coaching, and so seeing the different flavors of that. But I will also speak about this from my own personal angle, myself being for sure one who has been for a long time identifying with, oh, yes, I'm a perfectionist, and so I should be, because that is the right way. I should be, and maybe even everybody should be. And from that angle of living my own life, getting stuck quite quite intensely, and then of course finding my own journey out of that place, which I am thrilled that this work gives me the chance to share and to bring to other people as well. And basically, Megan, I found that there are 4 flavors. You'll tell me if you have found even other ones, but I found 4 different flavors of getting into the feeling that I'm the wrong parent for this child. It should be somebody else parenting this kid, anyone but not me. And that can get really tricky, because the moment we start to slide down that path, then we can really begin to feel helpless, disempowered, like not knowing what to do, and that perhaps somebody else should parent this child. And well, that usually then takes the shape of some other professional should parent my child. And that is a really uncomfortable, scary place to be for you who gave this little being a life. And so the point of us naming these 4 patterns here is to see, do you find yourself in any of this? Do you see that some of that applies to you? And if you do, that is a sign that, okay, we have some real good work here that we can do to help shift out of that, because that is not the final state where you have to stay stuck forever. So with that being said, let's go with the first shape that, oh, I'm the wrong parent, typically takes, and that is, by the way, the one that I personally have identified with at a previous part in my life, and that is, I don't do emotions. Emotions not my thing. I don't know
Right.
what they are. I don't know how to talk about it.
Hmm.
It doesn't seem very relevant, to be honest. I rather get practical and logical. So what is all this talking about emotions? And so
Just love that. Being a researcher and studier of the brain, you're like, nope, no emotion.
no emotion, thanks. These are confounding factors, right? Well, until the moment where you find yourself parenting a child that has emotions running their life to the point that those emotions begin to run your life, because as a parent you find yourself, okay, I no longer know what to do here. I feel
Right.
completely lost.
Hmm.
And that is where the maybe I'm the wrong parent, right? Or maybe somebody else who has a degree in psychology should actually be with this child and figure out what to do. Okay, that is the place where, if that applies to you, I want you to, oh boy, yeah, I find myself there sometimes. And if you do find yourself there, then don't believe that that is where you are destined to stay, because that is not true. Personally, I am a living and ever evolving, for sure, but living proof of that. And I've seen the transformation happening many, many times for parents, and the gender doesn't matter here. Like, I'm not talking actually about men, I'm talking about men as much as women, mother, father, and all
Right.
that.
Hmm.
Shall I continue with the second, or Megan, do you
Well,
want to
no,
take it from here?
I'm just like letting that settle, right? Exactly, because this is not when you think about how perfectionism is born, right? Part of that can be based on the way that you were parented, and needing to keep it all together. And so, what does that create? That creates a lack of vulnerability. I can't be vulnerable. I can't feel feelings, because if I do, um, then there's no going back from that, and that's not safe, because especially in traditional parenting teaches children that emotions are not safe, and that it's our job as children to keep the adults who are in charge of us happy. And so, if any of us were raised in homes that used traditional parenting, or we developed a pattern where we received a lot of accolades from perfectionists, or we just happened to be born with a tendency to want to get it right the first time, and that's a highly sensitive component that could be really relevant for a lot of the families listening, but absolutely all many of the families that we work with. And there's a big component of that, as well as discomfort, right? And the discomfort of trying to unlock the emotions on your own end. And if your pattern was to just stuff them, then of course you feel uncomfortable talking about emotions, or trying to teach your kid about emotions, or out of your element. Um, and so this is one piece that we see, because judging yourself for that and keeping yourself stuck in that judgment that you're not the right person is going to perpetuate the problem with your child and those meltdowns. So this is one myth we want to bust, that you are the perfect parent, even if you're perfectionistic yourself. We can help you break out of that. That's a habit, not a personality.
Beautiful. Okay, and then we have what looks like the opposite end of the spectrum, and in reality it's still the same kind of perfectionistic mindset, but it looks like, for other people, I'm constantly flooded by emotions. All of my life feels like an incessant, never-ending stream of emotions. My own, my child's, my partner's, everybody's emotions are flooding me, and I am just feeling lost, like I'm feeling like I'm floating in this maelstrom of stuff that I haven't quite yet learned how to shape, how to contain, how to dissipate, and how to work through for myself, let alone for this kind of child that doesn't even have a prefrontal cortex, and so I cannot even fully kind of have a conversation rationally with. And so perhaps a lot of these people have actually learned how to work through some of that emotional turmoil in other parts of their lives. Maybe professionally they're very successful, and they share how at work I can totally keep it together, but man, the moment I come home, I just get overwhelmed with whatever is your flavor, whether it's worry, panic, fear, or anger, frustration, or second guessing and doubting everything I do. There is just this feeling of emotional overflow that seems like unmanageable, especially at home, and therefore leads to the conclusion, I guess I'm just too worked up about this, too sensitive to this. Somebody else please do this because this feels like too much for me.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. So that experience of being flooded, right? And this is important because when we think about the families that we help, it's very common, right? You might be highly sensitive, or you might be working in the helping field. As we know, 70% of the families that we work with have at least one parent, if it's a two-parent pair, who are helpers. They're teachers, nurses, doctors, therapists. And so with the emotional management skills that you might have needed to build in your profession, it can be incredibly draining, because you're using that skill all day long, to then have to come home and be just as skillful or even more skillful at home. And then there's no room for you, right? And as a parent, you need to be able to have that experience at home, to have room for yourself to relax, grow, not be perfect, and make mistakes and apologize and model, etc. And when that skill set that you find yourself using is mainly just holding a lid on a boiling pot to manage your stressful emotions, we can see this play out as reactivity in the home, where having a hairpin trigger, or just either in yelling, right? Because there's a lot of exhaustion going on in the household when you're dealing with these meltdowns. I mean, 3 to 5 times a day, meltdowns that can last 20 to 30. Sometimes for some families, it's 90 minutes a pop, right?
Yep.
There's no more time in the day, whether you work from home or not, work in the home or work outside of the home. That your whole day is shot focused on managing meltdowns and just helping your kid not lose it even longer. And when that's going on, obviously exhaustion kicks in, and dread kicks in, and self-judgment, going back to this perfectionism of,
Right.
I haven't been able to turn this around yet. What makes me qualified to try this again?
Right. And again, that's a very painful place to be. Just the feeling of heaviness and helplessness that one finds in that place when it's our child. So there is a sense of just, it doesn't compute, it doesn't make sense. How is it possible that I am not able to? It feels like I'm not the person to parent this child, but part of you is telling, of course you are. Like, of course you made this one, in whatever way you made it. By the way, that includes also we have families that are adopting their children, and still that potential and possibility is there, and that moments of confusion comes. And there is another, the third for this kind of piece of work, this third version that comes up sometimes, that it's a little different than these previous two, in that the notion of I'm the wrong parent comes from realizing that some of the things we tried in the past didn't work and may have contributed to the problem. And so, as the information about highly sensitive children is still not very available, it's not, for whatever reason, is not very openly accessible. Parents go through all sorts of trials and errors in figuring out how to help, and some of these approaches are the opposite of helpful, especially when they are designed for totally other forms of personalities compared to the highly sensitive trait. And so there is this scenario where, from the best of intention, we tried things and we get really, really negative results, counterproductive situations. And when that happens, sometimes there is a powerful sense of guilt that sets in for the parent, and that kind of just triples the load of every subsequent step along the way, because then it sets up almost expecting this to never go well, because I, as the parent who has been looking for a solution, have made it worse by means of my action, and the guilt and shame that comes from that can pull us down, and make this belief that I can figure this out. When I did try, I made it even worse. Therefore, I can't possibly figure this out. That kind of beliefs can set in and can tremendously slow down the process and kind of create a dead end experience, which is it's not a reality. You can turn that around too, and there is some important emotional work to be done to turn that around. But we have seen that happening over and over again.
Exactly. So, again, there's a big difference between beliefs and habits and personality. And when you've engaged in different tactics in parenting, like sticker charts, or just following courses that don't work, or reading books that are general parenting advice compared to specific to highly sensitive kids, or reading books specific to highly sensitive kids that don't support parents in seeing all of the possibilities. They kind of keep highly sensitive kids stuck in and then this kind of like a general okayness as the main goal. Right. General survival outside of misery. Your child has grown up, but they're still living in your basement when they're 25, and they have a job, but it's not the job that uses their entire intellect, because emotionally they can't manage that, and emotionally they can't manage being on their own. So this isn't a choice to live in your basement because they're saving money and they have big lofty goals to buy this house outright, and they have a plan. It's I just can't handle one more thing on my plate. So mom and dad, can I stay with you still? And that is an expectation from some people who have written books on highly sensitive kids, and a totally fine one. The failure to thrive, failure to launch, is pervasive in a belief of what's possible for highly sensitive young adults. And that's incredibly important to observe when we think about how your tactics, what theories your tactics stem from, right? What perspectives of shifting your parenting approach and how you're leading your child, what principles is the author following? And what beliefs do they have about what's possible for sensitive people? And so when we think about that, obviously, if you're following directives that aren't even relevant to highly sensitive people, like traditional parenting, which isn't relevant to any child, if you ask me, but absolutely and significantly damaging to sensitive kids, lecturing, shaming, corporal punishment, sticker charts, even behavior-based modification, all that stuff keeps kids out of the realm of feeling motivated from their own heart and wanting to feel better, but rather trying to feel better to please other people. And that's not sustainable, right? Because if you're a parent who's judging yourself for not being perfect, and you're trying to use strategies that teach your kid that the only way that they can succeed is if they keep other people happy, you've just perpetuated the cycle of perfectionism in your home. And so, of course, the tactics that you might be using, or the approach that you're taking to help your child change, which could also be in terms of using an external resource like a mentor or a therapist, to be the person who is the catalyst for change, that also isn't effective when we think about how highly sensitive kids learn and how highly sensitive kids digest information. They do the best of that through their parents. So this is why we're covering perfectionism so thoroughly today, because if you are the caregiver of your child and you're stuck in this self-judgment, then your child's picking up that message from you as well. And it's significantly impactful in their belief about what's possible for them.
Totally. And speaking about believing what is possible for them, there is this fourth type of, maybe I'm the wrong parent for this kid. And the fourth is a little bit more subtle because it's not so much about there is something wrong with me, the parent, but it's maybe this child is so sensitive that I and nobody with the kind of just normal sensitivity can possibly parent them. Sometimes when we don't understand how the whole trade works and how we are playing into that, it feels like this kid is just reacting to the subtlest, most insignificant little cue ever. And so it feels like you cannot even raise your eyebrows half millimeter, that all of a sudden they are going from 0 to 60 and trashing and yelling and screaming, and it feels like, oh my goodness, like this is impossible. How can one possibly be so in control of every single little detail of their tone and face and all of that? This seems like madness. And so I must be the wrong parent here, not so much because there is something wrong with me, but because there must be something wrong in them that makes this relationship impossible. And so I guess somebody else who has maybe a robot face or trained every single tone, then maybe that's the only way in which this child can ever be related to. And that is again another stuck point. That's a myth that is actually not true. There is a bigger picture that is happening underneath the seeming absurdity of this micro interaction, and uncovering and decoding that bigger picture is necessary to understand how you're not the wrong parent, they are not the wrong child, there is nobody here wrong, but there is missing pieces in how we are working together through the whole relationship. And this is doable. You don't have to be a robot. You don't have to gain control on every single detail of your eyebrow to be able to, or your tone of voice at every single time, to be able to effectively raise a highly sensitive, confident child. I don't know, Megan, what's been your experience coaching parents around this?
Yeah, exactly. Because what's going on is that, the word you used, which is this isn't normal, right? And when we think about comparing sensitive kids to non-highly sensitive kids, or to the non-highly sensitive personality, the 80% who are not highly sensitive can look at a highly sensitive child, especially at such a high level of stress, and think, this is how my kid is. This is their personality. This is part of the personality. That meltdowns and the personality are synonymous. And since I can't be perfect and the perception of perfection is walking on eggshells to the max, right? Like,
basically, yeah.
Trying to float above the floor with perfectionism. Levitate yourself in your own home so as to not disturb the crackly floor, and let alone demonstrate any emotional experience in your own home. And that obviously is a symptom of the meltdown cycle. This is not your child. Right. This is your child exhibiting significant symptoms of the meltdown cycle. And those symptoms, guess what? They go away when you address them in an effective way. And so it's important to understand as a parent that in order to break out of the meltdown cycle, you cannot judge your child's capacity for change and their needs based on how explosive they are, based on how hairpinned their trigger is. It's not the right word, but based on how sensitive their trigger is, because hypersensitivity paired with hypervigilance becomes extreme sensitivity. And hypervigilance is a symptom of the meltdown cycle: always on edge, irritability, annoyance, aggravation. So we see parents who come in and they say, oh, my kid's not having daily meltdowns. And we find out in our initial phone call, that they're walking on eggshells all day long to kind of keep that together. So if you're like, yes, this is the thing a lot of our parents are dealing with. So we're not just measuring, when we think about the meltdown cycle, how frequent the meltdowns are. That can be happening a couple times a week. But if you were yourself as a parent, if you were relaxed, if you weren't, buttoned up and buckled in, how many more meltdowns would you be having? Mm-hmm. And that belief that your kid can't handle anything but perfectionism is a perfectionistic belief. And that's going to keep you stuck. And so when we think about being able to break out of this pattern, it's incredibly important that you stop judging your kid and their capacity based on their current behavior, right? So it's kind of like when we think about, I don't know if maybe you have a better metaphor, Nicolo, but I'll roll with what's in my brain. Because I don't like to indicate that so the meltdown cycle indicates a broken component in the family function. All right, so let's use that, because your kid's not broken, right? But when the whole family is in the meltdown cycle, because this is a family dynamic issue, then the system is broken. All right. And so when we think about this from like the concept of a broken arm, right? Let's just get tangible. This is a broken arm I have right here. And when you're trying to move your fingers and wiggle them, but your arm is broken, right? And it's broken, for those of you who are catching this on a podcast and not the YouTube channel or Facebook or whatever. I'm pointing to my above the elbow. This is where it's broken. Okay. And I'm not a doctor. I don't know what bone that is. So, this is where it's broken. Your arm is kind of dangling. I'll stay out of the gore here. You can't judge the function of your fingers and what's possible for your fingers. Okay. And how effective you are at holding a scalpel, for example. Perhaps you're a surgeon. You're born to be a surgeon, but you can't hold the scalpel effectively in that hand with those fingers if between your elbow and your shoulder there's a break in the bone. There's going to be some wincing involved. There's going to be some pain, some yelping involved when you try to hold a scalpel. Okay. Or a fine-toothed pen, if I find a fine-inked pen and write beautifully in cursive, right? Whatever skill, fine motor skill that we're focusing on here, that's neither here nor there. What I'm focusing on is noticing that if you're judging your kid and comparing them to like how well their fingers can hold something, but their arm is broken, that's the family system that's not working in an effective way, that's helping them stay out of emotional pain, because it's incredibly painful to be in the meltdown cycle for your child. It's like going through life without skin. And the viewpoint of what's possible is significantly altered, right? I mean, all you can see is the fingers just not being capable of holding something with such a tight grip, because there's a muscle impacted by a break in a bone, 3/4 of the way up the arm. So, but if you're not learned in that, then you might think, okay, let's go take my kid to a hand surgeon. Let's go take my kid to to OT to have them help their grip, right?
A calligraphy course.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a better metaphor, because we work with OTs on our team at MTC, so it's not that's not a great metaphor comparison. But yeah, exactly. Let's have my kid practice more. Mm-hmm. Thank you. See, this is why it's not just me running the show here. Let's practice more holding that pretty little pen. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
when we're not addressing the reason why it's hard to grip
Yeah.
in the first place. That's the root we're talking about here. And so part of that root is you as a parent, right? This is one part of the puzzle. You as a parent, stuck in thinking that you are not the one who is supposed to teach your kid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what the metaphor you're bringing up to me also reveals how sometimes the quotes solutions that we try to find not only clearly do not solve the problem, but end up exacerbating symptoms. I was thinking, as you were talking about broken bones and painful arms, I was thinking about the low back pain example, which is a situation where one example of how it comes up is, right, there is this weakening in the muscle of the back, and then everything gets really, really, really stiff as the body attempts to protect the kind of the traumatized area, and then what we at some point think that we should do it. Okay, I need to do more low back exercise. I need to strengthen my lower back, and we start to do all sorts of exercises that in a matter of a couple of weeks have tripled the pain and have made you even more stuck than what you were at the beginning. And another example of that, okay, I have low back pain, so I guess I will need to move less, get some rest, and sit a lot. Another example, another sure recipe to make it go worse in the shortest amount of time possible. When you actually need to do is look at more systemically what is going on. What is going on in those abdominal muscle and leg muscles that are so weak that are not holding the body together, and such that the lower back is taking on all the slack and trying to keep the body up from a place that is not meant to be. But you see, you find the solution only when you look outside of the symptomatic area and see at the broader system, and you intervene in points that sometimes are completely different than what the symptom itself looks like, whereas the intervention on the symptom in and of itself make it worse. And it doesn't make sense, and the perfectionistic part of us just get completely nuts, because it seems like you're doing the right thing, you're doing it diligently with intention, with effort, and things not only do not get better, but sometimes even get worse. Mind-blowing.
Yes, exactly. And that problem can be supported by reactive tactics, and even professionals who set up these reactive tactics, who follow a reactive tactic model. And so when we think about what that means, it means talking to pediatricians who tell you to go do a behaviorist approach, like sticker charts, rewards, points in the house.
Right.
It focuses on a pure behavior modification model approach to professionals who might be in either the therapy field, the occupational therapy field, speech therapy field, right? So I say the first one was mental health therapy,
Right.
all of that, none of that's going to work. And
not to mention the random friend who wholeheartedly suggests that you should just crack down on discipline and it's just stop giving the kid free passes,
Exactly. Yeah, your neighbors watch these meltdowns happen as you're trying to get your kid in the car, right? And their backhanded comment or front-handed comment could be, hey, more timeouts worked well for me, or anything of the sort. Rolling eyes, looking at you like, what do you got going on here? Why aren't you in charge? And obviously, that doesn't work. Taking the advice or taking the criticism of somebody who hasn't helped people break out of the pattern is going to continue to keep you in the self-judging component of perfectionism, but you're not good enough to solve this problem and to serve your kid into emotional freedom. And that emotional freedom means that they don't have a hairpin trigger. You can be sensitive, you can emotionally experience big emotions throughout your day, but that doesn't mean that it triggers you to react.
Yep.
Those two things don't go hand in hand unless you're stuck in the meltdown cycle. And parents have to make this shift, right? So, obviously when we work with parents directly, Nicolo, Let's cover, what's available to parents when they make this shift. Obviously, we'll talk about our particular clients in that sense, because that's what we're privy to.
Yeah.
And breaking out of this pattern. But once you stop walking on eggshells, start seeing what's truly possible for your kid, and the fact that just going to the park on a daily basis isn't where you stop dreaming.
Totally. Well, what's possible is confidence in knowing that you have a plan and that you're doing what you need to be doing to support your child in a way that leverages his being highly sensitive, as opposed to eggshelling around and trying to kind of bubble wrapping because of the highly sensitive trait being playing out as a weakness, as a liability. So confidence in knowing that you're doing what your child needs. And what's beautiful is that you get to play to some of the strengths that are underneath the perfectionistic trait, because let's recognize that there is leverage, there is strength in that as well. If one way to break down the perfectionistic trait is to talk about three components. One is called the concern over mistakes. One is called the doubt about actions. One is called organization. Okay. And so when we look at how these three correlate with mental health outcomes, we see that the first two are a strong, reliable predictor of depression and anxiety. The more we are concerned about mistake, and so the more we frame what we do to begin with as a mistake, and we kind of emotionally get triggered by that and get reactive with that, and we doubt our action, the more anxiety and depression we experience. However, the organization piece per se is a protective component with respect to both depression and anxiety. So having a plan, knowing what you're doing, and being strategic about it, which is part of what plays into the perfectionistic trait, can serve you really well the moment you detach it, that you unglue it from this intense concern and doubt about mistakes and basically everything that is going on. And so the moment you leverage the organization piece that, as a perfectionist person, some of us sometimes bring, you leverage that and you bring it together with confidence in what you're doing and how you're understanding what you're doing, you're out of the stuck that the perfectionistic cycle keeps you in with respect to depression and anxiety. And then you are able to play to the strengths that each of us, that to some extent identify as sometimes being perfectionistic, can bring to the table without getting bogged down into the swamp of the concerns and the doubt and the second guessing and judging.
Yeah, exactly. So just I love that just what you just said right there. It just drags you into the swamp, keeps you stuck in the mud, right? And so when we think about being able to rest in a strategy, rather than staying stuck in reactivity, the strategy, the support of following a strategy, rather than just being reactive, starting to use tactics, throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, allows people to stay curious in how they're learning to apply a strategy, right? Rather than worrying about getting it right the first time. Because when you're stuck in reactive tactics, like, hey, there's a cute little blog that I looked at on Pinterest about how my kid should learn how to take deep breaths, and it involves bubbles. And I better make sure that I get bubbles that are actually going to blow. Last time I played bubbles with my 7-year-old in the backyard, he got so mad
Right.
that the bubbles didn't blow, right? Because it's, those wands are cheap and 7-year-olds don't blow all the way effectively. The spit pops the bubble in the wand before it actually goes through. And so then you're trying to teach deep breaths with a frustrated child.
Yeah.
So when you carry all of your success onto a tactic, there's a much heavier weight around the fear of success. I mean, the fear of mistakes. Excuse me.
Mistakes, yeah.
And so having to get it right the first time feels imperative, because that bubble wand might get thrown halfway across the yard and your dog might pick it up, and then you're just, then the whole afternoon is shot.
Yeah. And that's a classic example of a pattern that will prevent you from moving forward, like that fear of getting it right the first time. That is exactly what is keeping the family system, including you and the child, kind of stuck. And so that is what we need to kind of work out of.
And so then, in being able to release that, because you follow a plan, you can, and when you work with experts, you can learn that your question, experts who solve the meltdown cycle problem, our clients, they learn quickly, actually, it's okay for me to not have all the answers before I get moving.
Totally.
So they break out of the emotion-seeking perfectionism. I'm sorry, the information-seeking perfectionism too.
Yeah. That freedom from having to know all the answers, while at the same time you're moving from a science-based system, so you're not just floating in the void, but you have a system and you have the freedom to not have to know all the answers. That is what opens up, Megan, you were mentioning curiosity, and so it opens up that kind of ability to see what actually is happening and work with what is happening as it is happening. And that flexibility, that kind of ability to flexibly adjust and work with the nuance of every situation, basically makes for that ability to handle no matter what is the challenge. And if the bubble doesn't bleep, doesn't blop, doesn't pop, you're able to handle that. And if the weather is not the way it was supposed to be, you're able to handle that. And if the birthday present doesn't turn out to be what the child hoped to be, you're able to handle that. And you don't have to have all of this beforehand, because you can see, as I'm playing with this example, these are infinite scenarios that you need to be ready to handle, and you can't possibly have the exact strategy tactics out beforehand for each of those. You will need to be able to work with what is happening, and that involves being willing to not have all the answers beforehand, but work through the emergence, from a sense of confidence, and knowing that even if you don't know all the answer, you have what you need to find it out at every single case, predictably and confidently.
I love this. I like to, you've heard me liken what we do to teaching parents to speak the foreign language of highly sensitive child, right? While your highly sensitive child is learning to speak their own language, emotional language, emotional safety, and you're the one teaching them. So it's kind of like, and Nicolo, we can use you as an example. I'm sure you'll appreciate me using you as a guinea pig. English is not your first language.
Right.
And when we're thinking about the fact that you need to be fluent in English in order to teach it to your kids, the concept of having learned as a parent a language first and or simultaneously, say for example your kids were older and they were learning English at the same time you were, there would need to be some immersive experience on your end to pick it up,
Absolutely.
quote unquote, faster than them in order to start speaking English to your children. And this is the metaphor that I like to use with our clients, because your child is starting to learn that language of their own emotional experience. Right now, they're speaking gobbledygook. That's what that is. Scream, plop, throw, hit, kick. This is the language of chaos. And so as you start to be the one who's teaching your child that language, that allows them to learn faster because they're in an immersive experience.
Yeah.
Because who are they more immersive with than you at home as a parent? You can't immerse in learning a foreign language an hour a week.
Beautiful. Yeah.
You can't as a parent, and neither can your kid, go into a session themselves. And so in order to immerse, I can imagine if your parents were learning English at the same time you were, that you would need to have some certainty that your parents were ahead of it than you were if you were younger, right?
Yeah.
So, we can take the earlier metaphor where you're the one teaching your kids, maybe a higher reference there. But just understanding that and noticing that as a parent of a highly sensitive child, that foreign language has to be taught to the parents and the children, and the children need to learn through the parents.
Totally. Like if what you are experiencing is what we're talking about, namely, the meltdown cycle related to a highly sensitive person, this will change with an immersive experience of a different relational dynamic, and it will not change 1 hour every 2 weeks of work with somebody else. It will not. It needs an immersive experience, and the language metaphor finds me totally on board with that. And the immersive experience is true for all parties involved. So the child needs immersive experience that only you, as the parents, can provide him or her. So this is why this is one of the reasons why you are the person to do this work. You are the right person. You are in the right place at the right time to do this work with them in your home, in your daily interactions. At the same time as you are also learning the language, you also need an immersive experience. And well, myself, I would definitely immerse myself like I have when I needed to learn English, and I continue to immerse myself in my, continued improvement of English by living with my wife, who is, mother tongue. Now, basically, the work we do here at NTC is the closest approximation to that. So we're not going to come and live in your house. We will not do that.
No.
But the support that we provide is meant to provide as an immersive experience as it is realistic and feasible and sane to do for you to learn that language, which is also why you can't pick this up from a book. Even if the book says all the right things, this is not going to go anywhere. Just like you're not going to pick up a language from, reading some good instructional book. That is going to be at best, a thin coating of some kind of picking up a couple of words. As far as the language and communicating, that takes you an immersive experience, which is exactly how, the work that we do here is set up to be.
Yeah. And building that confidence, knowing that anybody can learn to speak the language of a highly sensitive child, because this wasn't innate for me. There was some components that once I learned the science behind how highly sensitive kids became explosive, then I became the Shannon whisperer in my home with my sister. Mm-hmm. But before that, I was just as guilty, if that you want to use that word, just as ineffective in my family dynamic growing up, at blaming my sister for her drama, blaming my sister for her overreactions, right? And that's obviously judgmental language, but that's just how somebody who's not highly sensitive can interpret a highly sensitive person without skills. And so then when we think about the fact that if I was able to learn it, then you can certainly learn it too as a parent. And we can make that heck of a lot shorter than the decades of experience that I have and all of that, because we've hacked the system, right? And so the immersive experience can be quicker too, and it doesn't need to take years and years and years. Because obviously, sure, you can get your kid, we'll stay in the metaphor, that Babel fish or Duolingo app and say, yeah, go ahead, kid, go learn French, right? And you're not going to be able to tell if they're speaking French effectively if you're not also trying to learn French, mm-hmm. right? And and that's harder to do with a computer system with no feedback, no gauge, right? Or and it's harder to do without an immersive experience, and it's harder to do with an immersive experience without you on board maintaining that progress, because we're talking about raising children here.
Yeah.
When you have your kid that has a skill, emotional management is not a skill like riding the bike where you pick it up and then you don't do it for a really long time and then you can pick it back up later. Emotional management is a skill like learning a foreign language. If you stop, my husband's Ukrainian, so he's gone to he did immersive experiences like Ukrainian Boy Scouts, Ukrainian church, all that stuff. His mom spoke Ukrainian in the home. And he lost a lot of it because he doesn't speak much of it, but at family events, right? And so because we don't have a lot of his extended family local, and so that's the metaphor that is much more effective to consider how your child needs to learn, and that experience has to happen in the home, has to happen through the parent-child relationship, even just in understanding that metaphor. That's a no-brainer. But we take this and we move this into science. We move it into research. We understand how highly sensitive people have been researched for the last 30 plus years, particularly. If you look at the research when sensory processing sensitivity was named in the 90s by Dr. Elaine Aron, but even prior to that, when sensory sensitivity was identified by Carl Jung in his research and in his writings in 1920s, and by Marsha Linehan in her mental health research in the 1960s. And here we are in 2022 and noticing that there's plenty of information out there. But reading a book about how to speak English or how to speak French doesn't teach you how to speak English or how to speak French. So what do parents need to focus on, right? We need to focus on understanding the fact that you as the parent are the catalyst, the change agent for your child. That is irrefutable in the research. And if perfectionism is standing in the way of that, then no problem. We're experts on that. Because highly sensitive kids without skills start to develop tendencies to become perfectionistic. So we are experts in helping perfectionists break out of that perfectionist pattern. The next thing is being able to observe that you need to be playful, right? And breaking out of that black and white thinking perspective that you aren't the one to do it. It must be somebody else. We need to get curious about that. We need to challenge that belief. Is it based in science? Is it based in fact? Is it based in results? Yeah. Or is it just based in an emotion?
Yeah. As Megan, you mentioned being playful as one of the axes of the work. It's been beautiful to witness how the initial reaction that somebody who comes from a perfectionist identity, initial reaction that they have to the idea of being playful, there is this initial kind of cringing, tensing, like, what are we talking about? Like, what do you mean being playful? Yeah. And then how that experience for the families we work with, it literally melts over time, and how this becomes something that, of course, has been there all along. It was, very powerful for everybody. It's one of the innate strength that we have. Is one of the driver of learning, and so that's how we get to learn, all of us. And then at some point, for some of us, that kind of has been kind of cut out. As if something kind of just irrelevant, basically, or even detrimental, perhaps. And how that, gets illuminated in the early part of the work, and how that then kind of breaks down, melts away, and how this apparent dichotomy between high standards and effective organization and, good strategy on one side and playfulness, how this apparent separation just fades, and there is this ability of being playful and being strategic and organized, and pursuing high standards. This just totally boom makes sense
Yeah.
and fit together in a shape that before was mentally as well as just emotionally and physically was just unthinkable and was out of the field of what could be experienced. So that's something beautiful that I see related to playfulness, perfectionism playing out in this work.
Exactly. And when you think about it, this isn't a paradigm shift to like just to go straight from perfectionism to loosey goosey. That's not what we're talking about here. There's science behind play.
Right.
Right. And play is the language of children. So of course we need to teach you guys how to speak that language, right? And to do that from a highly sensitive standpoint rather than a non-highly sensitive child standpoint. And then children who have a hard time playing and relaxing also need to learn that.
Yep.
Highly sensitive kids can be stuck in their talking, thinking brain, and that's an anxious brain.
Yeah.
It's an anxious brain. And the experience that sensitive kids need to be able to be imaginative. We've seen countless, our one of our clients, Danielle and Jeff from years ago, as they were getting ready to graduate boot camp, mom asks, hey, and I just noticed my daughter, she started playing more in imagination, and she's getting more imaginative in her play. Is this something that you've seen before? And I said, yeah, that's the result we want. Your daughter was stuck in, I can't, I won't, I don't know how. And relaxed children play consistently and more thoroughly with more imagination. And so the experience of being able to watch your child creatively solve their problems doesn't just come into play when they don't want to wear a sweater outside and it's 20 degrees out. It comes into how big of an imagination the highly sensitive child is capable of engaging with in their own brain, and how we grow that, right? And how the brain is plastic. The brain is moldable. It's not rigid like steel. and we have a lot of awareness around the fact that is also true for you as an adult. That there's science behind play and that there's strategy behind play, and you don't have to be innately playful to break out of this pattern of the meltdown cycle. You can learn from people who have taught, quote unquote, not innately playful people to become playful. I don't think I've shared the story before, but at least not in this context. My first job out of grad school was when the bubble burst in 2009. And it took like 6 months for me to get a position because I was working on finding a position with adolescents. And those are that's a subset of what's available. Tons of positions to, mental health for adults, right? And that was not what I wanted to do. So I had really narrowed my focus from the beginning. I knew, from 8th grade that I was going to work with teenagers. And so come grad school, many years later, I've narrowed my focus. This is where I want to go. And I accepted a position that required me to travel. And 2 days later, I got a position to work with young children as a play therapist, studying under play therapists who had been working in the field for 20 years. Each, several of the leaders in this really significant system that I was invited to work in, and outside of the DC area. And because it didn't include travel, there was a highlight there. And they were like, okay, we'll throw you a bone. We'll let you work with like 5 teenagers on your caseload. They're like, we could probably have some overage here. It was a community services board. So it was a government system. They served families that run the gamut in all kinds of circumstances. And they knew that they could figure out my caseload and make that happen for me. And I said, all right, let's do it. And with that being said, I was like, I am not an innately playful person. Babysitter, I was like, hey kids, go play. Like, I'll watch you from where I sit. Well, and can I be reading a book, please? This is why I didn't babysit often as a kid. I went to other means of professional employment when I was young. But back to my piece here, where that skill was easily built upon science and skills and exactly what to say when before I started to become more intuitive and relaxed in that process and being able to lighten up, if you will. So if that can be taught to a clearly parentified type A perfectionist like I was back in the day, then you too can learn as well. Those of you who are listening, that ability to break out of this pattern is absolutely something that can be taught. It's a habit, not a personality. So how do you do that? How do you do that, guys? You book a call with our team, break out of this pattern, okay? Move into playfulness, stop using shame and lecturing and hard-nosed approaches to teaching your children. They don't learn that way. It doesn't actually work. It's not research-backed. Follow a system that actually works. And if the system that we have, that we've designed here at MTC is relevant for your family, which I don't know yet, we would have to figure that out on a phone call. So go ahead and book a call with our team. Go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk. Or if you're a teenager, and teenagers can be playful too, right? Teenagers who are stuck in their houses, wanting to curl up in bed. Their playfulness is sitting on the desk, that sketchbook that they've been ignoring for the last 6 months to a year. That's their playfulness, and your team needs to be engaging in that way as well. And we would address this problem with stuck teenagers as well. And you would go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk to address that. And if what we do is going to work for you, we'll talk about that on the phone call. But first, we have to figure out what your challenges are. What is your family struggling with? Is what we do relevant here? And if your goals are in alignment with the freedoms that we help our clients create in their own homes, then we share with you exactly what to expect on that phone call, how to break out of that pattern right then and there on that one phone call. And that allows you to make a change immediately, because haven't you been waiting long enough to try to solve this problem? Have you been trying to fix this problem on your own without support ineffectively for years now? And there's no judgment in that. A lot of people will try that method. It just doesn't work when you're stuck in the daily meltdown cycle. So here at MTC, if what we do works, we talk about that. If it's not relevant to your particular family's needs because of some other extenuating factors, then we break through the conversation with you on what your challenges might be. And we teach you what skill sets you need to learn and what professionals you need to seek. Because quite frankly, when you're in the meltdown cycle and you have a sensitive kid, or if you're a kid with big emotions and perhaps they're not sensitive, which is where that might not be a fit for us, professional support is absolutely relevant at this point, because no child was put on this earth to be miserable. No family was put on this earth to be miserable. And it's in everybody's best interest that you solve it early, because habits do become personalities when there's no way out. So again, go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk or meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk if you're parenting a sensitive teen who's in high school. All right. Thank you, Mikolo, so much for joining us. And
thank you, Megan.
I'll see you soon. And then again, guys, always a pleasure to speak with you. We look forward to speaking with you soon, and talk to you later. Bye.